Today we are going to be making our ramp and our ramp sides following our directions here in our yellow packet. The first part here says to locate the pre-cut ramp from the white box in the storage bins. So on the north side of our building here, we have a white storage bin in our little cubbies. In that white cardboard box, you're going to find some pre-cut ramps. We want to pick out one ramp, and then here it says above the bins will be a narrow board for sides. They're actually right next to the box. Some boards are a little thinner than others. This one happens to be a little bit thick. It doesn't matter. This is the board we are going to use. The next step says line up the ends. So I'm going to line up the end flush here, and I'm going to line up the end flush there. So the bottom and the side, we're going to line up flush. And then we're going to do this a little bit different than the directions say. The directions say to make a mark about a 1/4 inch from the ramp. So the directions say to guess where a 1/4 inch is. We're not going to guess. We're going to be accurate here. We're going to take our ruler. We're going to measure in a 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to push my ramp in a 1/4 inch. Keeping it flush with the bottom. And now I'm just going to trace the angle on my ramp. There we have it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our block, we're going to line it up, we're going to flip it over, we're going to line it up with that angled line. I'm going to take my ruler, so it says here reverse the block we just did, and offset from the line. Instead of offsetting, we're just going to use our ruler and measure again. We want to be as accurate as possible. So we're going to measure 1/4 inch. I'm going to keep it flush on the top side here, bring it down, and trace that edge. We just traced both ends. Our next says to cut angle line first with the bandsaw, next cut the square line, then we'll glue it together and sand it. I will go cut this and I'll be right back. Here we have our two ramp sides cut out and our ramp back here at the bench. We are going to glue these together. We want to make sure that both of these flats on the top are on the same side of our ramp. So when I glue this together, I want to keep the flats up. So they're both on the same side here. We'll glue them together just like that. So flats are both on the top. If they're not symmetrical, they're not exactly the same, that's okay. We are going to sand these down afterwards. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the sides of the ramp, not on the ramp sides. Because if we put glue on our ramp sides, they'll probably squeeze out and get all over our ramp. So in this case, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the sides of the ramp instead of the ramp sides. Do not need much glue here, just a little glob. Smear around with your finger. Put all your excess on the other side. You might need to touch more. Again, just a little bit here goes a long way. If it squeezes out and gets all over your project, again, that's not a good thing. We don't want to see all that extra glue come squeezing out. Like that. I'm going to put this on by hand, just eyeballing it. Doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to sand these square later on. Put it against the ground or on the table. Make sure there's no extra glue squeezing out the bottom. If there's extra glue squeezing out of the bottom, now would be a good time to wipe that off. But since I don't have extra glue, I'm going to use the table, push against the table, make sure everything's flat. I'm going to just run my finger across this. This feels flat as well. Both flats on my ramp sides are up. I'm going to put it in my clamp and squeeze it tight. Doesn't need to be super tight. Just make it snug and let that sit for approximately a half hour, and that will be set up. Once your ramp sides are glued to your ramp, our last step is to sand it lightly. And very lightly, we are going to square up all of our edges And then I'm going to sand the flats of these down till it matches my ramp height. And then if for some reason these are cut at a really funny angle, there's a gouge in them, be very, very careful. You can sand those flat as well. If you did a great job sawing them and they are about the same size, go ahead and leave them. Just hit them with some sandpaper to clean them up. Again, if you have these cut at a really goofy angle, we can clean them up on the belt sander. Be very careful when you're using this on the belt sander because your fingers are going to be within that 2 inches margin of safety. So you have to be extremely, extremely careful when sanding this. Keep it flat on the table of the belt sander when you can. That way it doesn't try ripping it out of your hands. Here I have it sanded. I've sanded my flats down. I sanded the back of it flush. I've sanded the bottom of it fairly flush. And then I took some 220 grit, our fine sandpaper, and I touched up all the edges because I'm not going to be able to sand this when it's glued to the project. I also sanded off any pencil marks I could easily reach. That way, when it comes time, this part is ready to glue on to our project. There's our ramp.